Hello, Internet family. This is Anjanette Potter, also known as Adam's Rib, and you are listening to the Out and About Columbus, Ohio movie commentary. So, I guess you could call this a bit of a movie review, but I like to give a substantial amount of background on the reviews that I give, and I like to do enough of a review that if you go see it, there's not a whole lot of spoilers, going on. So over the weekend, I managed to see three movies. Actually, three movies, and then I binge watched a TV series. So the first movie I'm going to do today, and then the next two podcasts are going to be about the other two media that I got to see. And then I'll be back on doing Anjanette Speak and Smart Black Girl Club topics. So over the weekend, me and my mother, the Queen mother, got a chance to go out to a movie, something we haven't done in a while. We just been kind of laying off of it and everything. So when she decided she wanted to go see something, and it was something that I had wanted to see, I jumped at the chance to go with her. So the name of the movie is Spinning Gold, and it is a biographical drama or biopic, written and directed by Timothy Scott Bogart, and it is based on the life of his father, Casablanca Records founder Neil Bogart. So I am one of those people that I love to see anything. I love to see movies about my favorite musicians, and I probably have watched a ton of Michael Jackson biopics, some good and some bad. And, I tend to like to, I just, love, they take me back in time. Here lately, I have been on a thing of watching a lot of old sitcoms, and it isn't a nostalgia thing. I'm not stuck in the past. I like watching some of the stuff because I like to watch it from the standpoint of a 56-year-old grandma that's raised two children, that remembers the 70s and remembers where I was in my life during the time that a lot of history making things took place. I also like to think about what I think about that material now that I am 56, that I do have a grandson, that I do have two grown children, 34 and 28, that I have raised to adulthood as a born-again Christian. So, the biblical aspects of it. And, just a whole lot of different vantage points. Back at the church that I used to go to, one of the things I used to constantly tell men who have been married for a very long time, my uncles, I come from a family where there's a lot of long marriages. Many of my uncles have been married to the same woman almost my entire life. And so my mother, unfortunately, didn't fare as well. Her and my father divorced when I was an infant. I was only about a year and a half old. I was not much more than a baby when they divorced. It was not a very good divorce. It wasn't a very pleasant divorce. There were some issues with child abduction. So we had to go through that whole drama and everything. It was just not a good scene. And believe it or not, I came out of it with my dome straight. And believe it or not, I could probably give a whole I could probably give a whole podcast to talk about that whole missing child and parental abduction thing, because I've lived it. Even though at the time it was occurring, I did not feel abducted. And, really was not abused by the abductor, which was my father. And when I think about the fact that I see all these people going to jail for abducting kids, and I was like, my mom was way nicer to my dad than what she could have been. He could have gone to jail. He could have gone to jail. My aunt could have gone to jail. My grandmother on his side could have gone to jail. So that's something to think about. And to be honest with you, if you are in that situation where you are thinking about doing that, do not. Do your level best for the sake of your children. Those of us that have lived through unpleasantness because the people are no longer together, beg you, please try to have as pleasant. Do what you can to have as pleasant a co-parenting situation as you can. And I'm not talking about women on that one. I get a little sick and tired of people, and especially churches, that want women to twist themselves like a piece of silly putty to keep accommodating all kinds of craziness from men. Men, you know when you're wrong. You know when you're wrong. You know when you are just being a complete asshat just because you got on some male power trip that you want to prove a point or whatever your problem is. Your kids are seeing when you keep a whole bunch of craziness going on with their mother. You are teaching your daughters to accommodate crazy. And you are teaching your sons that a good woman tolerates. Well, you're teaching both your sons and your daughters that good women tolerate crazy. And it's not right. And you shouldn't do it. And if you feel like I'm shaming you, maybe I am. Or maybe I'm trying to bring about some conviction about your behavior when it comes to how you treat the people who give birth to your children. Whether she was a one-night stand, whether she's your ex-wife, whether she's just your baby mama, whether she was a long-term girlfriend, you are no longer romantically involved, and you still have these children together. And a grown man finds a way. One of my uncles fathered a daughter out of wedlock. And I used to say the way he and her mother got along, you would have never known that she was out of wedlock. Well, there shouldn't be a difference. Whether you were married or not, you still ought to be able to act like you have some sense because this is your child. And if you are acting crazy and if somebody has to get a restraining order against you because your behavior is that off the heezy, your child ought to be the reason that you get help for anything that you have a problem with that is keeping you from seeing your children. I oftentimes use humor when I say this, but most men say the same things when it comes to men who are not acting right within their household. Every single one of y'all. That ain't our problem. That ain't our problem. That's them. That's their household. That man has a right to act however he wants to in his own household. Y'all all say that same lie. And that's a lie. Because if your behavior gets bad enough and it's a criminal offense, you can be taken to jail. You can be, have a cease and desist or whatever, they can legally keep you away from your children if you enough of an earth disturber. Okay? Let me go to old school black. If you are enough of an earth disturber, the law can tell you not to come around your children. there's a thing called a restraining order, which we recognize that if some of you are crazy enough, this restraining order don't mean nothing because you'll treat it like it's just a piece of paper, which is typically how you try to get in women's pants. But that ain't nothing but a piece of paper. It's a piece of paper that if any of your children's mothers decided to enforce it, could have you locked up and thrown away. Now, I hear all of y'all on the internet everywhere with your little entitled selves of all colors, hollering about your rights and men's rights and being resentful, but not ever do I hear any of you admitting what you did to cause you to get in that predicament. Okay, I hear, brothers in church in the pulpits talking all this garbage, and it's like, listen, if these men are off the hook, that woman has a right to that woman has a duty. Not just a right, but a duty to protect herself and her children from people who harm, even if the person who does harm is the children's biological father. Now, I hear so many people talking all this nonsense about single or unwed single mamas. But not once do you ever say anything about the other person who was responsible for these children existing in the first place, and that's their dad. You want to tell single mamas whether or not they qualify to be anybody's wife. But not once do I hear you talking about who qualifies to be somebody's husband. Anyway, I wasn't planning on going on this little diatribe because this is supposed to be a movie commentary, not, my soapbox. So now that I've, went there, and I will be talking about, and I will be talking about this topic a little bit more. I just don't want to take up this entire podcast going there, being on my soapbox. So the name of the movie is Spinning Gold once again, and I'm going to repeat this information so that I can refocus us. So it's a biographical drama or biopic that was written and directed by Timothy Scott Bogart, and it is about the life of his father, Neil Bogart, who is the founder of Casablanca Records. Now, as I said before, I've been watching a lot of stuff. So here lately, I've been looking at the reruns of Love American Style. So I will talk about that. I will talk about that show another time. But I always find things that are set in the 70s very fascinating because a lot of history was made in the 60s and 70s. So one thing that was occurring during the time of especially the 60s and 70s, especially the late 60s and early 70s, was a thing called the sexual revolution. So when you see stuff that's set in the 70s, you may see a lot of orgies. You may see a lot of men getting down with men and women and people being very free sexually, depending on how you define freedom. It is during that time period, in generations past, where you also often hear a lot of these baby groupie stories between rockers and underage girls. Because, the age of consent, there was an age of consent like even then, but I don't think it was very strictly enforced. So that's why you see so many young people, you hear these stories like here lately, I've been looking at YouTube and I've been seeing different people giving commentary on Brooke Shields' story. So I plan on seeing her documentary or her movie next, and it's called, what is the name of that movie? Lord, one of her earliest and very, 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 very controversial stories about child prostitution, amongst other things. let me go ahead while I'm here. The nice thing about something being yours is that you can look up any information that you need to look up because you're not working for somebody else. I think the film was called Pretty Baby. I never saw it. During the time that Pretty Baby was, okay, so Pretty Baby was 79. So one thing I have always given Brooke Shields kind of credit for is having a testimony. And so the reason why I say she has a testimony is because she came through a lot. Her mother didn't make the best decisions when it came to the type of material that her daughter would star in. And this bad decision making went way back to, I think, her being about 8, 9, or 10. Like, she was underage. You have to pray for these child celebrities because even though the money sounds good, there are some pretty depraved minds in the entertainment industry. And so back during this time period, being a person who came of age in the 70s, because I was born in 66, I often say to people, children of the 70s, Generation X or whatever, we are so fortunate to have come through that whole experience with our brains intact. Because during the 70s, a lot of things were going on. And I remember Casablanca Records because many of my favorite artists recorded under that label. I was a big Donna Summer fan, Kiss fan. Many of my, I went to a predominantly white elementary school. So many of my white friends, my white female friends were really big fans of Kiss. And so Kiss, was a favorite. Who else? Isley Brothers recorded for them for a while. My mother was a big Isley Brothers fan. My mother goes all the way back to the 60s, I think 60s with the Isley Brothers. I didn't even know the Isley Brothers had been around back then. So my first take, and I've been an Isley Brothers fan for life. My first introduction to the Isley Brothers was in the 70s. And in the 70s, if you remember R&B in the 70s, or if you've ever listened to if you're young and you're listening to me, if you've ever listened to any of your parents' music, because I used to get into my mom's albums and listen to her stuff. So I've always been a bit of an old soul that belongs to Jesus Christ, still Christian. But I've always been, a little bit ahead of my time when it comes to what I listen to. I'll get in my mom's old albums and listen to her Supreme stuff, which I used to do all the time. Isley Brothers, Earth, Wind, and Fire. In fact, a lot of their stuff, the closer you come to the present, the more I'm like, I like the old stuff, all the way back. And so I remember the Isley Brothers during the 70s. So the first time I remember that they were even around back before the 70s, which the 70s R&B was more about funk. Everybody was a funk fan. Everybody was playing funk. It was that really seriously hard, edgy stuff. So the first time I knew anything about the Isley Brothers being around in the 60s and, being almost go back as far as Motown, was sitting on the TV and watching some old musical retrospectives and seeing old footage of them. And I was like, wow, they go back that far. They've been around a long time. And so they also came out of that doo-wop tradition, which I think I am going to do a show on doo-wop. And I may do it this Friday. Give us a little bit of I was going to continue the happy anniversary hip hop, happy 50th anniversary hip hop, and I may still. Okay, but I'm going to do a special dedication to Mr. Hold on here. Bobby Caldwell. And so many of you remember Bobby Caldwell's biggest hit, What You Won't Do for Love, which is still playing and people are still requesting. And that song, dated back to the 70s. So the 70s Casablanca records, I remember being sort of a very huge vocal point during the 70s disco period. And so he also worked with Gladys Knight and the Pips. So they seem to, from the point of view of the movie, there seemed to be a bit of an ongoing rivalry, unofficial rivalry between them and Motown, because they were around at the same time. I think they might have come around a little bit later. So let me give you a little bit of background on Casablanca records. So Casablanca Casablanca is a record label that is owned by Universal. You probably have heard of Universal Music Group, and you probably have heard of Republic Records, which they operate under there. So Neil Bogart was most successful during the disco era of the mid to late 70s. The label currently focuses on dance and electronic music under the direction of Brett Alperitz. So many notable artists that were under Casablanca during its heyday were Kiss. So they had released, and that was 3 albums, Hotter Than Hell and Dressed to Kill. So they also had a group called Angel. Let me look here. So Angel was an American rock band from Washington, D.C. They were formed in the 70s by Punky Meadows and Mickey Jones. They were primarily known for their flamboyant glam stage presence and white satin. I remember them because I remember at the time there was a bit of publicity about a group named Angel that, they kind of came under Kiss. So if you don't know, Kiss was now we would probably call them hard rock or metal, but at that time they were just considered rock. In the 70s there was a lot of glam rock being celebrated. A lot of bands, especially a lot of white rock bands, there was a lot of costume wearing. During that time period, you would see people like Ziggy Stardust, which was a character formed by Model Iman's late husband, David Bowie, who we do miss very much, along with her. So during that time period, a lot of rock bands kind of preceded the whole hair and metal band thing by being some of the originators. Some other notables would be Meatloaf, if any of you remember him. So, but Kiss was the one that was from Casablanca. So another notable artist under the Casablanca label was Donna Summer. Donna Summer was another black woman during that time period that made me feel proud to be black and female. And she had the most impressive vocals. She was one of those who I used to get with, that I used to get my brush out and sing to her music. She was a very strong alto, and since I am in that range, Lip Sync, who did the song Funky Town, Parliament Funkadelic, So Parliament was signed to Casablanca in 73 due to Bogart's long-standing relationship with group leader George Clinton. Their relationship dated to Bogart's period at Buddha Records, and their first release for the label was Up with the Downstroke in 1974. So their title song from that album gave Parliament its first top 10 R&B hit. The next song, Chocolate City, sold approximately 150,000 albums in the Washington, D.C. area alone. But it was their next release, Mothership Connection, that gave the group its first gold and platinum album. Okay. The Village People, the people who we get the hit YMCA from, they were also notable. Mika, I don't remember Mika. Okay, Relax, Take It Easy, which was released in 2006, so that's probably why I don't remember Mika, because that's a little new. Lindsay Lohan, I did not know Lindsay Lohan reported with them. So she signed on there under the management of Tommy Mottola. For those of you don't know, Tommy Mottola, I believe is Sony, but he also was married to singer Mariah Carey at one point. Tiesto, Kungs, Martin Solveig, S.G. Lewis, and others. So now most of the artists that were mentioned in the movie, so they also had subsidiary labels. In 1975, they started a subsidiary called Chocolate City Records. Okay. They also had another subsidiary called Parachute. The Parachute was run by former Motown Records promoter and Uni Records CEO, Uni, Russ Regan. Different artists that were signed to that label were singer Randy Brown, the heavily sampled disco group Seventh Wonder, and singer-songwriter Shel Silverstein. And so the offices of Casablanca moved to the former A&M Records offices on Sunset Boulevard. Okay. And so in the years after Mr. Bogart, so they weren't as successful. I think he was a bit of, back then, from what I've seen, a lot of record company presidents, people tend to, just like Motown is associated with Berry Gordy, you'd have a hard time, associating Motown without Berry Gordy. Casablanca is associated with Mr. Neil Bogart. And so from what I see here, and all information is courtesy of Wikipedia, Casablanca was not as successful without Mr. Bogart running the company. The only notable releases from 1980 onward were Robin Williams' debut comedy LP, Reality with a Concept, the soundtrack to the movie Flashdance, and the final 3 Kiss LPs, which were Unmasked, music from The Elder, and Creatures of the Night, Dusty Springfield's solo release. White Heat, okay, Creatures of the Night. So Dusty Springfield's solo release on Casablanca, 1982's White Heat, came and went with little notice due to the label's mounting internal problems. The most successful act on the label during the 80s was R&B singer Stephanie Mills, who we just saw in her verses with Chaka Khan. Now, she came to the label after Polygram purchased the 20th Century Fox label and absorbed its artists and back catalog into Casablanca. The last album released on, I remember Animotion. So the last album released by the label was Animotion's Strange Behavior in 1986, which was a modest seller. By the time Polygram had folded Casablanca Records and moved its acts to Mercury Records and dropped others. Okay, so to get a little bit of background on Neil Bogart himself, now I'm going to go into a little bit of background on Mr. Bogart. So Neil Bogart was born Neil Scott Bogarts. So a common thing back during in the past was for a lot of people who wanted to break into the entertainment industry to change their last name to something a little more American. So passing was a big thing, even for people who were white. So he was born February 3rd, 1943, and he passed away May 8th, 1982. So Mr. Bogart was American record executive and founder of Casablanca Records, and later which became Casablanca Records and Filmworks. Now, if I'm not mistaken, Casablanca Records also may have been responsible for a film called Thank God It's Friday. And if you ever get to see it, it's a fun movie to watch. It's very funny. Donna Summer actually acts in the movie. The Commodores perform in the movie, so if you like 70s funk and want to see Lionel Richie back, he's still in his heyday to me, even with American Idol. But if you want to see Lionel Richie back when he was younger, this is a good movie to see all that, and it is funny. Very, very funny. So, Mr. Bogart. So let's get into his life. He was born in the Brooklyn Jewish Hospital, Central Brooklyn, New York City. He was the son of Ruth Markoff and Alan M. Bogarts, and they were Jewish. He grew up in the Glenwood Houses, a housing project in the Flatlands section of Brooklyn. He was a singer in the 1960s. I thought that was interesting, and it is really interesting how many recording artist owners or CEOs at one point were artists or trying to break in. So he was a singer. I was trying to find, I may still try to find it. So he was a singer in the 1960s and used the name Neil Scott prior to running the Michigan offices of Cameo Parkway Records. So after Cameo Parkway was shut down by the government for stock fraud in 1968, Bogart became an executive at Buddha Records. He is credited with having been a key player in the rise of bubblegum pop music. During his time working at Cameo Parkway and Buddha, He decided to start Casablanca in 1973 when he first signed Kiss, and later became identified with the rise of disco by promoting the career of acts like Donna Summer and the Village People. The Casablanca roster also contained rock acts such as the Gods, T-Rex, Fanny, and the Hudson Brothers. But the label became best known for its disco product. They also are known for tapping into the funk market with the signing of George Clinton's Parliament in 1974. Prior to his death, he founded Boardwalk Records and jumped on the new wave bandwagon as disco was in decline. So some of the artists that he is associated with during that time period are Joan Jett, Phil Seymour, and Harry Chapin. So Bogart died of cancer and lymphoma at the age of 39, so he was really young. He interred at Hillside Memorial Park in Culver City, California. So his legacy, his widow, Joyce Bogart Tribulus, teamed with songwriter Carol Bayer Sager to found the Neil Bogart Memorial Fund, now the Neil Bogart Pediatric Cancer Research Program. Whole lot going on here. In 1984. That same year, the fund established its laboratories at the Children's Hospital, Los Angeles. The fund was a division of the T.J. Martell Foundation until the 2000s, or new millennium. So in art, entertainment, and media, in music, like we said, Kiss. The Kiss album, The Creatures of the Night, is dedicated to Bogart's memory. The dedication is found in the back cover of the original vinyl release of the album near the bottom. Casablanca. The dedication is also found on the CD release on the inside of the insert where the credits are located. Donna Summer's self-titled album from 1982 is also dedicated to Bogart's memory, and the liner notes contain one of his favorite sayings: "Why head for the mountaintop when you're reaching for the sky?" I think that's pretty cool. Village People's 1982 album, Fox on the Box, was also dedicated to Mr. Bogart's memory. So, films that he's associated with. In the 1980 film Can't Stop the Music, I remember that, actor Paul Sand plays a record executive loosely based on Bogart. In 2013, this was something that I was going to bring up. I'm going to mention this again, though. In 2013, Justin Timberlake signed to star in the feature Spinning Gold, which is the movie that I'm talking about, a biopic of Bogart written by his son Tim Bogart. In June 20th, 2019, it was reported that Jeremy Jordan had taken over the role, which that's who played him in the movie that I saw this past Saturday. And so, Going Platinum, a book about Bogart, was released in 2014. It was written by his nephew, Brett Ermelio, and Josh Levine, published by Globe Perquo Press. So, now, another interesting fact about the movie Spinning Gold. It is listed as one of Spike Lee's unrealized projects. So initially Spike Lee was signed on. So on October 3rd, 2013, now this kind of shows you a little something about the movie industry. And if you are a person who is submitting a script, you will find out why so many people like Spike Lee, John Singleton, Robert Townsend wound up funding their own projects to get them on the screen. Okay, so it is what now, 2023, and we just saw the movie this past weekend. But on October 30th, 2013, Spike Lee was in negotiations to direct the biopic of Neil Bogart, with Justin Timberlake set to play Bogart, with son Tim Bogart writing the script, and it was entitled Spinning Gold. Now, on June 19th, Tim was announced as the director, and Jeremy Jordan replaced Timberlake as playing Mr. Bogart. And that's 10 years. Now, the reason why I bring that up is an interesting fact, because if you are a person who is a screenwriter, or you are a playwright, future playwright, or you have ideas for movies, one of the reasons why people tell you in the entertainment industry not to be discouraged at rejection is that because in that industry there's a lot of it. It doesn't mean you're not good. It doesn't mean you're not talented. It doesn't mean anything. Okay? People reject scripts and then they pick them back up. So I can remember at least two, and this is regardless of your color, believe it or not. So I can remember at least two movie scripts that were rumored to be being passed around, and and scripts get passed around a lot. And lots of times what you see on your screen is normally not what the writer of the script even had in mind. So I would love to read some of the press on this movie to see how I may make a part 2 on this commentary. But because we're getting into an hour now, I would love to do a part 2, because I would love to get into some of the press that some of these movies and shows get once people actually see the movie. And this is a little bit of a commentary on the next point that I'm about to make has to do with how long a script will get handed around from person to person before they finally decide to make it into a movie. So when this movie first became tapped, it was Spike Lee in 2013, right? We're just now seeing the movie in 2023. And that's not unusual. The Bodyguard, which, now is associated with Whitney Houston. At one point, I think it was a script that Ryan O'Neal, Tatum O'Neal's dad, had, and was trying to get Diana Ross to do. And this was, I believe, the 70s, maybe the late 70s, early 80s. The first I heard about it was in the 80s. And so they never really got around to making it, and they thought that it was not going to get made. And it was rumored at that time that he and Diana Ross were dating, and one of the reasons was because of trying to get her to do this script while they were dating. I don't know if that was the reason or not. Allegedly. During the time that they were dating, he was trying to get her to come on board with the script. They finally made The Bodyguard, and let me look up The Bodyguard. When did The Bodyguard finally hit theaters? So, The Bodyguard, 1992. Movie finally got made in 1992. There was a treatment for the Dorothy Dandridge story, and they were looking at some very famous names. I think now this is alleged again. Allegedly, they were thinking about Jane Kennedy. They were thinking about a lot, Diana Ross, like a lot of Donna Summer, a lot of very famous black women who were very, very, at the height of their fame. They were, in works, trying to get the Dorothy Dandridge story out. And that finally got made with Halle Berry. No, Halle Berry is extremely talented, but she's not a singer. I don't know if she can sing. That's a horse of another story. And so she is one of my favorite actresses, by the way. And a working ass. Halle done made movies that I didn't even really realize Halle made. That's just how many movies she made. And finally, Halle Berry winds up playing the part in, I think, the 90s. Same with Josephine Baker. They were trying to tap somebody to play Josephine Baker. Once again, the usual crew, black women who were famous during that time period. It is alleged that they were looking for someone to cast in that part. I always thought Janet Jackson would have been good for Dorothy Dandridge or Josephine Baker. So finally, they get the Josephine Baker story made for HBO. And when did that get made? And that was with Miss Lynn Whitfield, who did both of these artists did a knockout job. I'm going to say that much. So the Josephine Baker story. So the one that got made with Miss Lynn Whitfield got made, let's see here, in 1991. When did Dorothy Dandridge get made? So Introducing Dorothy Dandridge got made in early 1998. So it is not unusual for a movie to be handed around to several different people by the time it actually gets made into a movie. So you may be hearing rumors that they're working on a particular movie, but so-and-so is set to star in it and this, that, and the other. And then by the time they finally make it, you're like, oh my God, they finally made the movie. So it's not unusual for that to happen. I'm really kind of wondering, Spike might have just been too busy. Because that happens. You get tapped to do something, and then you got other things coming up. There's no, and to be honest with you, I kind of wish that it would have got made under Spike, because one thing that Spike is good at is taking you back in time and making you think about what it was like to be in the 70s, what it was like to be in the 70s, what the atmosphere was like. And he is, kind of the king of atmospheres. He has the ability to take you back in time and make you believe and make you think like, man, so this is what it was like back then. This is what, life was like back then. This is what people were going through. So, he was always good at that. So, now we get on. So, just one of them things where you kind of wonder. So, like I said, so let's talk about also. So, I don't know how familiar you are with the term queer baiting, but if you listened closely in this movie, there is a tiny, tiny bit of queer baiting in there. So queer baiting is a marketing technique for fiction and entertainment in which creators hint at but do not actually depict same-sex romance or other LGBTQ plus representation. The purpose is to attract or bait an LGBTQ or straight ally audience with the suggestion of possibility of relationships or characters that appeal to them. And so I won't say that it was necessarily baiting, but if you were in the movie, there were different things that happened that suggested certain things about the main character, Mr. Neil Bogart, of possibly maybe having a side to him. Okay. Of having, a side to him, which was not that unusual during that time period. One of the things that, that people talk about when they talk about the sexual revolution, which I will probably do a podcast on that, that not only did a lot of women tend to experiment, but a lot of men tended to experiment as well. Because there were less restrictive practices going on at the time. So let me click on my little thing for sexual revolution. So the movie takes place during the sexual revolution, which is a social movement that changed traditional codes of behavior related to sexuality and interpersonal relationships throughout the Western world, which we are considered part of the Western world, from the 60s to the 70s. So sexual liberation included increased acceptance of sex outside of traditional heterosexual monogamous relationships, primarily married. The normalization of contraception and the pill, public nudity, pornography, premarital sex, homosexuality, masturbation, alternative forms of sexuality, and the legalization of abortion are also proponents of the sexual revolution. So during the time of this film, this has happened, so you're seeing a lot of freedom in how the characters are portrayed to have behaved themselves sexually. Also, a lot of drug use, liberal amounts of drug use and alcohol consumption are taking place during this time period too. So I don't know, now that I know that Spike Lee, that it was almost tagged to be a Spike Lee joint, and I think that Justin Timberlake would have done a really good job portraying this guy, because, Justin Timberlake has established himself as one hell of an actor. So, now that it's like, now you whet my appetite for, something that didn't occur. What happened was the son of the guy decided to direct it, and they had another actor. The actors and everything, didn't do such a bad part, but didn't do a really bad job at portraying the parts that they were tagged to play. I thought Wiz Khalifa was really interesting as George Clinton, because if you've ever seen George live or seen George be interviewed or whatever, George is a character. He really is. They're fun to see in concert. I remember posting that I was going to see them in concert in Akron. And this lady, one of the Facebook groups, and this lady said, they always made me think of the hippies, the black hippies of the 70s. So them, the mothership, also along, you can't mention George Clinton without mentioning Bootsy Collins. During that time period, which was, I call it the P-Funk period, was, they were something else. They were something to see live. And they made some awesome music. A lot of them, there was also a liberal amount of drug use that was aiding with the making of the music. So it was, a kind of a sexual free for all. His casting was pretty cool. The other casting, the guy that they had playing Bill Withers, which is not even mentioned in here, in the Wikipedia article, I thought that was interesting. Anyway, in the movie they show Bill Withers, and the guy looks nothing like Bill Withers, and so I kind of have a problem with, a lot of the casting. I wish they would do their level best to try to get people who can capture the essence of the character that they're being tapped to play. My rating for the film was a 3 out of 5. And between me and my mother, the secondary rating, so we have a jokey joke rating system that I made up back in the day when the dollar movie was a big thing. And so I would say first run, which is go ahead and spend the $10 because it's worth it. The after that was dollar movie. If you just want to go to a movie to see a movie, then that's your movie. The third one I would say is Blockbuster, or wait until it's on VHS. In other words, wait until, wait until it's on VHS, which doesn't take very long anymore. And I don't even think people rent VCRs, because now we have Roku and you can just get it through Netflix or some other streaming service. My favorite, of course, is YouTube, because I can just go and, get my little card out and rent it. My third one, and this is going to sound really bad, my fourth one, and this is going to sound really bad, is cable. In other words, bypass all these other mediums and go on and wait for it to get on cable. Wait till it's on the premium channels on HBO. Like I used to say HBO, but HBO or some of the other cable channels, don't even fool. And then my number 5 one is USA. So USA means don't even worry about it on all these other mediums. Just wait till it goes to USA. Now I probably need to update that a little bit, because we no longer have VHS, because we no longer watch VCRs. For the most part, a movie can be out in theaters one week and be on YouTube the next week. I kid you not. And not YouTube for free, but like YouTube, like renting it. You can rent it on YouTube for probably $5.99, which means you don't have to buy no additional tickets. You can rent it for your entire family, and I think you have it for, if you rent it, I think you have it for at least 24 to 48 hours. So you can watch it as many times as you want to once you pay for it. I thought that was interesting. So I guess the new rating system would be first run, YouTube or other streaming services, basic that HBO or Showtime, which, like I said, they're not taking very long to get to those mediums. Basic cable, which is USA. Not to knock USA, I've seen a lot of good movies on USA, and then whatever. I gave it a 3 out of 5, and I gave it a 3 out of 5 because it's not a bad movie to watch. I felt like they could have, a lot of the first portion of the movie is the man's life story. And there's nothing wrong with reading about his life story. He led a pretty interesting life. He talks about how he, started off trying to have a singing group of his own. And they really, to me, didn't sound too bad. But I was trying to find, usually on Spotify, you can find everybody. And I couldn't really find him. I may look him up again. But they spent a lot of time talking about his life story. And I just felt like they could have beefed it up a little bit. By putting more, by talking more about the different acts that he managed. It seemed like the part that could have been shorter was kind of long. Interesting but long. My mother does, me and my mother are two different movie going styles, and so I'm the type of person I like knowing people's backstories. But the portion where he begins to strike it big, because they went through his struggles, because he was really trying to make a go of it. And he was just, the struggle to get businesses off the ground, especially a record label, it's a lot. People don't tell you the struggles and the stuff that you go through, and you're making this calculated risk, and it's costing you a lot. And so in this, he was banking on Kiss, which was actually a smart move. But, most of the people, I would have to say, for me, being around at the time when Kiss was big, Kiss was popular with a lot of elementary school kids. They used to wear the makeup, I kid you not. And the problem with being popular with younger people is most of their record buying money comes from their parent. And if you're popular with young kids, because they had Kiss dolls, they even made 2 Kiss movies. Holiday movies. I think one was set during Halloween because of their makeup and different other stuff like that. But I can't remember if the other one. I can't remember if the other one was a Christmas movie or if it was just another Halloween special. But during that time period, like I said, I was in elementary school, and so was my one friend who, she had an incredible crush on Paul Stanley. The girls just loved Paul Stanley. And so during that time period, when your appeal is to mostly a very young demographic, that can be a little hard, because most of their money to buy your stuff comes from their parents. And during that time, parents had a little more. During that time period, parents were a little bit stricter on what they would spend their money on. Like now, people, are a little bit more liberal. Kids have a little more buying power. But during that time period, if you have really strict parents, And they were the kind of parents who didn't want that noise being played in their home. Good luck on getting money from them to buy it. You would have to go to your friend's house and sneak and listen to it on their record player, and it would have to be one of your friends that's parents weren't quite as strict. And consider, they really did. They had to, which wasn't really hard to do in the 70s, because there were a lot, with the sexual revolution and everything that was going on during that time period. It was very easy to find a house to go to listen to some Kiss without your parents knowing you were listening to Kiss. And so, from what I was seeing in the movie, and they had adult fans now, don't get me wrong. There were grown people, especially grown white men that like Kiss. But for the most part, like from what I'm seeing in the movie, they most of the Kiss fans that they showed were younger. And like I said, when you're younger like that, a large part of, and I know that not from myself buying Kiss, even though I liked them, but I remember having to bug my mom for money to buy albums from my favorite artists. And even though my mother wasn't quite as strict as a lot of other parents, I know about the experience of having to ask your parents for money to buy music from your favorite artists. Now, pretty much every streaming service has a gift card or something that goes along with you buying music, and most of the music we listen to is through our smartphones. So your parents don't have to hear what you're listening to nowadays like they did in the old days with vinyl records and you playing it, and them, not having, if you didn't have any earphones, then they had to hear what you were listening to. And it was a whole lot easier for them to supervise what you were listening to and decide they didn't want to play it in their house. So, as a member of the record buying public, I can say that may have been one of the things that contributed to them having a hard time with promoting Kiss. Because they were a very adult group, and it was a very young crowd that really got to listening to them at first. Like I said, you also have to deal with the fact that this is their account. This is the label owner's son's account of the struggles that they went through with promoting Kiss, and they had problems with their other artists too. And like I said, it can take a minute they had problems with Donna Summer at first. The song "Love to Love You Baby" was a very controversial song during that time period because it's very adult. It's very orgasmic sounding sounds coming through coming on the record. It was very erotic, very sensual. And like I said, if you're a kid and you're a Donna Summer fan, luckily for me, my mom was a Donna Summer fan. So I would, sneak in. I could sneak and play my mom's stuff, and I really didn't have to do too much sneaking. Me and my mother's relationship was rather open. So if I listened to something, or if my mom forbid me to listen to it, we had a relationship of trust where if she told me not to, it usually was for a very good reason. And like I said, when your parents own copies of the songs, you can sneak listen to them. So yeah, I probably was the one amongst my cousins that people could come over and listen to it at my house. So I remember "Love to Love You Baby," and I do remember that there were several groups, especially religious groups, that thought the song was too erotic and too sexual and too sensual to be played on the radio for people's kids to hear. So she had some problems at first, and then, like I said, like anything else with the industry, You can have a record that does poorly at first and then comes back and makes a resurgence because now it's a fresh set of ears hearing it and it becomes a hit. They also, but other than that, I thought the years that I think the years that they came into stardom in the label, most of the movies that I saw about people starting record labels and doing different stuff like that, it was also interspersed with the different musical artists that they were working with at the time. And it could have had a little more, it could have had a longer, the years that he hit it big and finally began to recognize stardom and the money began to pour in, that part could have been a little bit longer. And it was one of those movies that, to me, it wasn't bad, but it was still kind of, it didn't start to get really exciting till about, I would say, the last third of the movie. And, it's one of those things where they wait until like the last third portion of the movie, and then the action starts to really hold your interest. And, I remember watching one movie that I could compare it to is Capitol Records. Because during Capitol Records, they had a lot of biographical things going on, but they also interspersed it with the music and the artists throughout it. So it kept your attention the entire time. Jason Derulo didn't do too bad in his portrayal of, I'm thinking he was Mr. Big, Ron Isley, also Pretty Tony from the Steve Harvey Show. So he didn't do too bad in his, he didn't do too bad in his portrayal of them. But it's like, I don't know what the budget was like for this movie. Let me look. So let's look at the reception. On the review aggregator website, Rotten Tomatoes gave them 33% of 40 critics' reviews are positive, with an average rating of 4.7 out of 10. That's not good. The website's consensus reads, a fairly flat telling of a true story that was far more colorful and entertaining in real life. See, that's why I wish that Spike Lee could have been on this one, because I think that if he'd have done it, one thing he's the king of is creating atmospheres and giving you a pretty accurate feel for what the atmosphere was like during that time period. And so Metacritic uses a weighted average and assign them a score of 39 out of 100 based on 7 critics. So they haven't been doing too good. So the release, reception, production, it doesn't say how much it costs to make. So I'm wondering if they made a profit at all. And the reason why I tend to, if you've listened to prior movie reviews of mine, I tend to talk about how much it costs to make the movie versus how much the movie actually made. And I tend to like to do that to give you an idea, especially if you're considering a career in movie making. Just like any other business, you have to be able to put butts in seats, as they say. So I didn't think that, and oftentimes I've really liked a movie and other critics have been like, don't go see this movie. And, I've also had movies that I really wasn't impressed with, and other people say, are you crazy? This is a good film. I'm going to say with this one, I'm still going to hold on to my 3 out of 5. And so 3 out of 5 would be, maybe you might want to rent it on YouTube to see it and watch it with other members of your family. And, not necessarily, I wouldn't necessarily call this one first run. You may go, unless you're just, like me, I just love seeing movies about music. I love seeing movies about, particular time periods, especially. I'm becoming a bit of a history buff, so, I wanted to go see it, and I did. And I wanted to go see it based on the ad. The ad did its job because it got us to be curious about coming to see it. However, like I said, once we saw it, I thought that much more could have been done throughout the beginning of the movie when they were telling his story. It could have done a little bit more to, captivate your attention and have it be a little more interspersed with, the music that he worked on during that time period of his life. The narrator, like I said, now that I know that Spike Lee, it's really hard for me to be objective now that I know that Spike Lee was tapped and then it just wound up not being made under Spike Lee. It makes me wonder what this film would have been like. I'm not going to tell his son, Mr. Yeah, I'm not going to tell Mr. Bogarts not to make any more films, but this particular, pay attention to what the critics are saying about about how this film could have been better. I believe in giving constructive criticism. And commentary. I'm not a person that will look and go thumbs down, because I like to think about what could have gone into making it better. And like I said, the part when he finally does reach his success could have been a little bit longer. And the better casting of the Bill Withers character, because the guy doesn't look a thing like Bill Withers. I remember my mother, we are both big Ladysee fans, but they felt like she felt like they could have used a younger actress to portray Donna Summer, Gladys Knight. She played Gladys Knight. So my mom felt like during that time period when they were first getting together and her playing Gladys Knight, that they could have used a younger actress. Just different. There's a lot that they could have done to create a more of an atmosphere of what it was like to be running a record company during the time of the 70s and everything. So all of that taken into consideration, I'm gonna keep it at a solid 3 because it wasn't a terrible movie. It wasn't a terrible movie at all, but there were parts that could have been, could have done a little more to keep your attention during the first 2/3 of the movie. We don't really see a whole lot. You don't really get excited until probably around the last third of the movie. So I'm going to go ahead and get off here because I have a couple of other reviews that I have to prepare for. You guys have a good rest of your week. Enjoy the rest of your week. And I will talk to you in the next podcast. That is the sound of me blowing you a kiss, and you have a good one. Hello, you have reached the message line for Adam's Rib Media Ministry. If you would like to give me a shout out, recommend some topics for discussion, or give an opinion about some topics that I've already discussed, either here on my podcast or on my blogs, leave me a message and I will get right back to you. Have a blessed day. Bye-bye.